The truth about oversharing. 13 Stoic lessons you wish you knew sooner. Have you ever noticed how every complaint seems to shrink the person who utters it, as if each syllable siphons off a drop of their own presence? We open our mouths to purge frustration, but paradoxically each confession becomes a brick in the very cage we say we want to escape. Marcus Aurelius warned, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." When those thoughts are exported into the air as constant narration, "I'm exhausted. Life's unfair. Nothing ever works for me." We aren't merely describing reality. We are spray painting it, then obliging the world to see us in those gaudy colors. The Greek Stoic Epictetus went further. "If people speak ill of you and it's true, mend your ways. If it's false, laugh." But what if the voice speaking ill is your own? Modern psychology calls this self-verbalization, the running commentary no one else hears, yet everyone eventually feels because it shapes your tone, posture, and choices. Every time you rehearse failure aloud, neurons carve the groove a little deeper, so deep that silence begins to feel foreign, even dangerous, like stepping off a familiar cliff. Hence, Thich Nhat Hanh's Buddhist reminder, speak only if it improves upon the silence. If it doesn't, you are handing your agency to the void one sentence at a time. This video, and the 13 Stoic lessons inside it, is a summons to reclaim that agency. It is not an invitation to cork emotion until it festers. The point, as Seneca put it, is to rule over words, not be ruled by them. There is a difference between honest articulation that heals and compulsive narration that bleeds. Modern dopamine research shows that publicizing a goal can trick the brain into feeling the reward prematurely. Likewise, broadcasting wounds can trick it into re-experiencing the injury perpetually. Silence, then, is not repression but strategy, an intentional space where thoughts may ripen before they are harvested into speech. Think of Socrates. Athens' greatest conversationalist was also its greatest questioner. He spoke sparingly, mostly to expose illusions, beginning with his own. He understood what Zen later codified as beginner's mind. The quieter you become, the wider reality grows, until wisdom flows in where noise once lived. Today, however, the algorithm rewards cacophony. We confuse audience size with inner stature, likes with enlightenment, transparency with truth. The Stoics would raise an eyebrow. They would say, explain less, embody more. So here's the premise. Every word you choose is a vote for the person you will become tomorrow and an instruction manual for how the world should treat you. Pour them out carelessly, and they form a moat no progress can cross. Deploy them with discipline or withdraw them entirely, and they become stepping stones toward a self you respect. Across the next 13 lessons, we will mine Stoic insight, modern neuroscience, and hard-won anecdote to craft a language of strength, or the courage to remain silent. Because mastery begins when the tongue obeys the mind, not the insecurity. Framing. Story. Isabelle's turning point. Isabelle never intended to become the designated siren for pain, yet by her 34th birthday she could not finish a single coffee without broadcasting a litany of fresh grievances. She unspooled them everywhere, at work, on dating apps, across breathless Instagram stories in which she half laughed, half wept her way through the latest micro-catastrophe. A missed promotion became a 20-slide rant. A tense conversation with her partner triggered a midnight Facebook Live titled, "I'm done being the strong one." Like Sisyphus rolling words instead of boulders, she felt briefly lighter each time she vented, only to find the same weight waiting at the foot of the next day. Unconsciously, she had embraced what Søren Kierkegaard once warned against, the aesthetic life of perpetual commentary, where experience matters less than the drama extracted from it. At first, the world applauded her authenticity. Friends showered her with emojis. Acquaintances DM'd sympathetic hearts. Even strangers chimed in, "Girl, same." The dopamine sparkles lulled her into believing that talking equaled processing, that exposure equaled growth. Yet philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein cautioned, "A man will be imprisoned in a room whose door is unlocked and opens inwards, as long as it does not occur to him to pull rather than push." Isabelle's prison was lined with her own sentences. She kept pushing on the exterior lock of public validation, never noticing that the key was a turn inward toward deliberate silence. The jolt arrived one humid Thursday evening over cheap pad thai and rosé. Clara, Isabelle's best friend since university, and the kindest skeptic she knew, listened to a familiar monologue about how no one understood Isabelle's unique brand of chaos. When the stream paused for breath, Clara's voice cut through, like November air. "Isa, I love you, but it seems you're in a relationship with the problem, not the solution. You narrate the wound so much I'm not sure you want it to heal." The restaurant fell away. Words deserted Isabelle for perhaps the first time in years. Clara's sentence echoed Epictetus's maxim, "What upsets people is not things themselves but their judgments about these things." But Epictetus never had to watch a friend's face collapse in real time. Isabelle left her noodles half-eaten, walked home under flickering street lamps, and powered her phone to airplane mode, an act that felt more radical than any #cleanse. That night insomnia herded her toward the dusty bookshelf where half-read titles lived in quiet rebellion against her noisy life. One slender volume slipped free, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. She had bought it during a fleeting philosophy is cool phase but abandoned it when the prose felt austere. Now austerity was exactly what she craved. She opened at random and met. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. The force of the imperative startled her. She read on. Remember that very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Under the bedside lamp, Isabelle underlined until the ink bled. Each aphorism struck her like a gong. Speech without action was noise. External sympathy could not patch internal leaks. The tongue is a tool, not a master. Seneca's whisper joined the chorus. The verbal injury is like a sword thrust. If you're vulnerable, it cuts deep, but your own hand guides the blade. For the first time, Isabelle sensed the cost of her verbal leakage. Every disgruntled tweet, every self-deprecating punchline had been a micro-tax on her sovereignty. She decided on an experiment. 3 days of active quiet. No social posts, no reflexive replies in chat groups, and hardest of all, no confessional spirals at lunch. She printed Epictetus's line, "Silence is safer than speech," and taped it to her phone case like a guardian. The first 24 hours felt like withdrawal. Silence exposed raw nerve endings she had numbed with chatter, the lingering bitterness about her father's absence, the unspoken fear that she was ordinary, the guilt about procrastinated dreams. She discovered, in Simone Weil's words, attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. And she finally offered that generosity to herself. Each time the urge to text a complaint surfaced, she breathed, 4 counts in, 6 counts out, letting the impulse dissolve unspoken. A curious spaciousness followed, the kind Zen master Dogen described as shikantaza, simple sitting in what is. On day 2, she attended a team meeting and, instead of leading the ritual grievance chorus, she listened. Really listened. She noticed who monopolized airtime, who shrank when interrupted, and where a single clarifying question might pivot the whole discussion. When she finally spoke, just one sentence, precise and neutral, the room stilled. Her manager nodded, jotted notes, moved on. No applause, yet the air around her felt thicker with respect. Lao Tzu had a line for moments like this. He who knows does not speak, he who speaks does not know. Isabelle did not yet know, but her nascent restraint hinted that knowledge was at least possible. By the end of the 3rd day, Isabelle realized her problems were all still there. Unpaid credit card bill, tense relationship, stalled side hustle. But they were no longer anthology material. They were data to solve, not stories to headline. Viktor Frankl wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response." Isabelle's silence had pried that space wide open. Where she once defaulted to lament, she now outlined next actions. Call the bank, schedule couples therapy, allocate 2 Pomodoros to design her product mock-up. A week later, she met Clara for coffee. "You feel different," Clara said, eyebrows raised. Isabelle merely smiled. No manifesto, no defensive recap. She discovered that when you stop narrating your life, other people volunteer the first chapter of your new one. Afterwards, walking home under the same street lamps, she recognized the faint hum of a sturdier self. She thought of Rumi. Silence is the language of God. All else is poor translation. Some evenings she still fought. The old reflex, the urge to tweet a frustration or fish for consoling emojis bubbled up. But she now asked Epictetus's filter question, is it necessary? 9 times out of 10, the honest answer was no. On the 10th, she chose a journal page, not a feed. Slowly, Isabelle's identity detached from her wounds and reattached to her will. She became, in her own understated way, what Marcus Aurelius called apatheia, not indifference, but freedom from needless passion. Isabelle's turning point did not crown her saintly or silence her forever. The Stoics never required robotic muteness. They required alignment, words that follow reason, not reflex. She still vented on occasion, but only after deciding whether the listener was ally or audience, whether the speech clarified or merely comforted. Aristotle distinguished catharsis that purifies from repetition that pollutes. Isabelle had learned the difference. Her friends noticed a subtler presence. She asked more questions, interrupted less, replaced, "You won't believe what happened to me," with, "How are you really doing?" Conversations deepened. Some companions, addicted to the old drama, drifted away. Others leaned in, relieved to exchange noise for nourishment. As the Buddha counsels, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. In time, Isabelle's social feeds revived, but sparingly. A photo of dawn light on her balcony, captioned only with Mary Oliver's invitation, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" No appended saga, no disclaimers. She had traded the spectator's spotlight for the sculptor's studio, where creation happens in the hush. And that, dear listener, is why we begin our exploration with her. Isabelle embodies the peril of verbal inertia and the promise of disciplined quiet. Her shift from chronic narrator to selective speaker illustrates the Stoic conviction that virtus, excellence, is practiced, not proclaimed. As we proceed into the 13 lessons, keep her arc in mind. Every guideline you'll encounter is a thread she wove, sometimes painfully, into a tapestry of regained agency. If she can step out of the echo chamber of her own voice, so can we. After all, as Pythagoras observed 2 millennia ago, choose rather to be strong of soul than loud of tongue. The choice begins with one decisive hush. Lesson 1. You speak badly about yourself and the world takes note. Stand in front of a mirror and declare, "I'm hopeless with money," or "I always mess relationships up." In that instant, you do more than comment, you issue a public decree. First, your own nervous system files it under evidence, then every ear that hears it stores it as identity. What you intend as a fleeting confession calcifies into reputation, inside and out. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus warned, "What we hear, we are." Modern neuroscience concurs. Repeated self-descriptions strengthen neural pathways like footpaths trodden into roads. Each time you announce a limitation, you lay an extra paving stone, and soon both you and your listeners can travel only in that direction. Imagine meeting someone new. Within 5 minutes, they've laughed at how useless they are with deadlines, insisted they always choose the wrong partner, and sighed that they never stick to plans. Even if they meant it half-jokingly, you now regard them through a lens of chronic ineptitude. Michel de Montaigne noticed this social reflex in the 16th century. We naturally judge a man more by his words than by his deeds. Our brains are lazy. We tag people with the labels they hand us, then behave accordingly, granting less trust, fewer opportunities, thinner patience. By speaking poorly of yourself, you unconsciously recruit the world as accomplice in your own diminution. The cost is internal too. Cognitive behavioral therapists call it self-verbal conditioning. Language not only reflects mood but manufactures it. Tell yourself you're incapable often enough, and the prefrontal cortex, seeking coherence, dampens motivation to match the script. William James, father of American psychology, put it plainly, if you want a quality, act as if you already have it. The shadow corollary is just as true. If you keep professing a deficiency, you will enact it. Words become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Stoicism offers a corrective. Its central ethical concept, proheresis, the faculty of choice, relies on clear, internal dialogue. Marcus Aurelius drilled himself nightly with sentences designed to fortify, not erode. I am capable of meeting whatever happens. He was not indulging affirmations for their own sake. He was practicing linguistic hygiene. Just as we quarantine diseased bodies, we must quarantine diseased phrases before they infect conduct. Seneca advised, the tongue should have its tutor, and governor, let none of it be voluntary. How then to reclaim the tongue? Start with reframing. Catch the default put-down, I'm terrible at presentations, and swap the judgment for a process. Presentations challenge me, but I'm improving. The revision seems cosmetic, yet it shifts emphasis from fixed flaw to active development, keeping the door to competence ajar. Second, ban self-deprecating humor as social lubricant. Telling the room you're the clumsy one might earn a laugh, but you pay by reinforcing the caricature. Confucius counseled, the cautious seldom err. Be cautious with jokes that use your dignity as collateral. Third, challenge others' outdated labels, politely but firmly. If a colleague says, you've always been disorganized, respond, I used to struggle with that, I'm training new systems now. This isn't vanity, it's stewardship of narrative. The Roman rhetorician Quintilian taught orators to name themselves lest they be named, recognizing that whoever frames the story wields the power. Finally, and most crucially, cultivate interior silence before exterior speech. Insert a breath between emotion and utterance. Pierre Hadot, chronicler of Stoic spiritual exercises, called this the inner citadel, a momentary fortress where you decide whether a sentence will serve or sabotage. If the phrase would etch impotence into the marble of your identity, let it die unborn. Remember, the world is an echo chamber. Speak weakness, and weakness returns to you, validated by nods, structured into opportunity grids, etched into your own synapses. Speak possibility, or choose dignified quiet, and the echo shifts. As Lao Tzu observed, watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. The Stoics add a sharper point. Actions sculpt destiny. Guard the gateway of speech, therefore, as you would guard a city gate. Let no self-denigration pass whose cost you aren't willing to pay in future limitation. Your voice is a brush. With each stroke you paint the contours of the self the world will meet tomorrow. Lesson 2. Your change doesn't need an audience. In an age when every salad, sunrise, and gym rep earns a square on the social media grid, changing silently can feel almost subversive. Yet the Stoics would argue that transformation exposed too soon is transformation endangered. Epictetus set the tone. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. The line is deceptively mild. Its implication is radical. If your growth relies on spectators, it is a performance, not a practice. The physics of publicity. Neuroscientists describe a phenomenon called social reality substitution. Announce a goal, say you're quitting alcohol, and your brain releases dopamine as if the first milestone were already behind you. The applause feels like progress, so urgency fades. That is why so many day 1 declarations die before day 30. Blaise Pascal anticipated the trap centuries ago. Vanity is so anchored in the human heart that a soldier, a porter, a cook boast and wish to have their admirers. Our circuitry hasn't changed, only the stages have multiplied. The Stoics countered vanity with internal scorekeeping. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of the world's mightiest empire, wrote nightly notes no one else would read. He judged the day not by cheers, but by alignment with virtue. Imagine opening Instagram to find 0 posts, yet knowing you have lived a page worthy of meditations. That is Stoic metrics. The seed and the storm, Seneca compared newfound convictions to seedlings. A plant often transplanted cannot thrive. Expose a still fragile change to the weather of opinion, skeptical relatives, sarcastic colleagues, and roots shallow. A single, "that'll never last," can snap a sapling resolve. Protect early habits the way monks shelter candles in wind, by cupping them with quiet. Case study: the silent runner. Consider Maya, a burnt-out designer who resolved to run her first 10K. The urge to tweet new runner life was strong, but she remembered Epictetus and stayed mute. For 6 weeks only, her sneakers and sunrise witnessed the slog. When race day arrived, she finished well, then posted a photo, finisher's medal in hand, caption, "Proof, promise." Friends were shocked, some inspired, some jealous, but none had the chance to sabotage her momentum. Maya's private incubation mirrors Nietzsche's counsel: the greatest events, they are not our loudest, but our stillest hours. Practical Stoic tactics. The 30-day cone of silence. When you adopt a new habit, impose a 1-month embargo on public mention. Journal results privately. If the habit survives, share or don't. The intent test. Before speaking, ask, "Am I seeking collaboration or validation?" If it's the latter, stay silent. Validation shortcuts rarely survive hardship. Selective disclosure. If accountability helps, choose a single anchor confidant who supports without fanfare. Seneca advised Lucilius to associate with those who make you better. One voice of honest feedback beats a chorus of shallow cheers. Celebrate internally. Replace public likes with private rituals, a quiet walk, a good book, an entry in your meditations notebook. Marcus would approve. Freedom in the unposted. When change is no longer tied to clicks or compliments, a peculiar liberty emerges. You can pivot without embarrassment, refine without apology, quit a dead-end tactic without a press release. Søren Kierkegaard called this secrecy of becoming, the sacred zone where possibility matures into being. Lose that secrecy and you risk living, as he warned, in the hope of being understood by everyone, which amounts to shutting oneself up in a crystal palace. Is this a blanket ban on sharing? No. Joy multiplies when witnessed, and strategic. Networking is real. But share like a craftsman unveiling finished work, not a child begging the crowd to believe the blueprint. Remember the paradox: the quieter the forge, the sharper the sword. So before you draft that next new chapter post, pause. Let the chapter write itself in muscle fibers, bank statements, calm mornings, or code commits. When results breathe, on their own, revelation becomes optional. And if you do choose to speak, you'll do so from solidity, not need, proof that your change never required an audience, only your consistent, unseen effort. Lesson 3. Shut your mouth and let your actions speak. Words are cheap, movement is priceless. In every coffee shop we hear proclamations. This year I'm launching my startup. Tomorrow I'll wake up at 5. I'm done with toxic relationships. The table nods, caffeine surges, dopamine flares, and nothing changes. A month later, the same voices recycle the same future tense promises, now padded with excuses. The Stoics had zero tolerance for this loop of self-deception. Marcus Aurelius drilled himself: do every act of your life as though it were your last. Not plan every act, do it. The credibility bank. Think of integrity as a bank account. Each promise is a check you write. Each fulfilled deed is a deposit. Talk without follow-through bounces like rubber checks, draining the account until even you stop believing your own signatures. The Greek skeptic Pyrrho observed that expectation is a chain that shackles the mind. Keep rattling that chain, and soon no one lends you credibility, not colleagues, not friends, not your future self. From smoke to steel. Goethe captured the physics of action. What you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. The boldness he refers to lives downstream of a silent decision, not an announcement. When we act first, words come trailing after like humble footnotes. Conversely, When speech precedes effort, it acts like smoke, visible, dramatic, but incapable of forging anything solid. Consider the parable of two blacksmiths. The first narrates each hammer strike to the village, loud, boastful, inviting applause. The second works behind closed doors. Weeks later, both present their swords. One blade rings true, the other shatters on first contact. The villagers realize conversation never hardened steel, heat, pressure, and silence did. Stoic engineering, from intention to execution. Micro commit, macro deliver. Set a micro action you can execute today with no fanfare. Draft the proposal. Outline, jog 1 kilometer, meditate 5 minutes. Log completion, not conversation. Seneca advised, lay hold of today's task and you will not depend so much upon tomorrow's. Public silence, private tracking. Maintain a private action ledger. For every task accomplished, mark a tally. After 30 days, compare. Ledgers, promises made versus actions completed. Aim for a 1:1 ratio. If talk exceeds deeds, tighten the tongue. The 2-sentence rule. When forced to speak of future plans, allow yourself exactly 2 sentences, statement of intent, plus time frame. Anything beyond that is ego rehearsal. Epictetus, first say to yourself what you would be, then do what you have to do. The quiet consistency edge. Psychologists call it behavioral signaling. People subconsciously calibrate respect according to observed consistency. Someone who speaks little yet always shows up triggers deep tribal trust. Our ancestors relied on doers, not talkers, to survive storms and hunts. Thus, quiet execution isn't just virtuous, it's strategically persuasive. You become the person whose yes means yes without footnotes. Modern proof, the silent builder. Take Satya Nadella's early days at Microsoft as CEO. Instead of broadcasting grand visions, he spent months in listening tours, coded small prototypes with engineers, and released a modest Office app on iOS, breaking a decade of platform dogma. Analysts scoffed until quarterly results revealed revived growth. His understated actions recalibrated a culture more effectively than any manifesto. Nadella echoed a Stoic axiom in interviews. The view people have of you must be earned in deeds, not PowerPoints. When to speak. None of this bans communication. Clear directives, genuine collaboration, courageous advocacy, all require words. The Stoic remedy targets premature speech, not necessary speech. Ask, am I informing to enable action or performing to inflate identity? If it's the former, speak succinctly. If the latter, return to the workbench. Final hammer strike. Every syllable squandered on hypothetical heroics siphons fuel from the engine of real change. Emerson advised, what you do speaks so loudly that I cannot hear what you say. Let that be your North Star. When your calendar bears the marks of relentless, quiet execution, you'll find your need to prove yourself evaporating. The world will read the engraving on your deeds long after the echo of your promises fades. Lesson 4. Change the story you tell yourself. Long before a word leaves your lips, a sentence is whispered in your mind. That inner narrator never clocks out. It describes, judges, predicts, and most importantly, labels you. I'm always late. I'm terrible with money. I crack under pressure. At first, such verdicts feel harmless, a private shorthand for quirks and fears. But as the Buddha cautioned, what we think, we become. Repeat the script often enough and the brain obliges. Neural pathways thicken, habits harden, and identity fossilizes around the narrative. Stoicism pinpoints the mechanism. Epictetus wrote, "It is not things that disturb us, but the views we take of them." The most influential view you hold is the view of yourself, and it is authored line by line in self-talk. Modern cognitive science calls this explanatory style. Optimistic storytellers interpret setbacks as temporary and specific, while pessimistic storytellers frame them as permanent and all-encompassing. The stories diverge, so do the lives. The psychology of the inner script. Psychologist Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion shows that people who address themselves with warmth instead of contempt recover faster from failure and persevere longer on hard tasks. Why? Because harsh self-talk activates the brain's threat system, flooding the body with cortisol, while kind self-talk engages the care system, releasing oxytocin and soothing stress. In other words, calling yourself incompetent doesn't motivate. It biologically sabotages the very capacities you need to improve. Stoic rewrites. The Stoics developed mental edits to keep disempowering stories from solidifying label, the judgment, not the person. Rather than "I'm a disaster," Marcus Aurelius would isolate the event. An undesirable result occurred. The self remains capable, only the circumstances flawed. Insert yet. Epictetus might have said, "I do not understand this yet." The adverb keeps the future open, signaling the brain to expect competence. Flip the vector. Seneca urged students to treat obstacles as fuel. The impediment to action advances action. Translate "I failed" into "I gathered data" for the next iteration. 3 practical exercises. Thought autopsy. For 1 week, jot down negative self-statements the moment they appear. End each day by rewriting them in neutral or constructive form. This practice mirrors the Stoic evening review and trains your mind to spot corrosive language. Second-person swap. Address yourself with "you" instead of "I." You handled that meeting well. Studies at the University of Michigan show second-person self-talk increases emotional distance, making feedback feel like advice from a mentor instead of a prosecutor. Philosopher's question. When self-criticism flares, ask, "Would I say this to a respected friend?" If not, the judgment fails Aristotle's test of practical wisdom, and must be revised or discarded. From monologue to dialogue. Changing the internal story isn't about plastering affirmations over anxiety. It's about fostering a fair conversation. Montaigne said, "A wise man sees as much as he ought, not as much as he can." Apply this inward. Acknowledge mistakes without sentencing yourself to life imprisonment. Growth requires honest appraisal, but honest appraisal includes potential as well as flaw, the compound effect. Replace a single self-insult today and little seems different. Replace a dozen daily, and after a month your nervous system feels less hunted. After a year your choices reflect a protagonist instead of a victim. James Clear calls this the 1% rule. Tiny narrative shifts compound into identity transformation. Picture 2 sculptors. One chisels marble while cursing every strike, "I ruin everything." The other murmurs, "Each chip reveals form." Same stone, different story, divergent destinies. As you rewrite your inner script, remember Goethe's quiet charge. Treat yourself as someone you are responsible for helping. The voice in your head is not a commentary track. It is the blueprint for your future actions. Change the blueprint and the structure of your life will follow. Lesson 5. Understand the power of every word. Imagine dropping a single pebble into a still pond. The surface quivers, then calms. Drop pebbles all day and the water never settles. Each new ring collides with the last. Language works the same way. One careless phrase may pass unnoticed, but repeated daily it churns the emotional waters of everyone who hears it, including you. Epictetus captured the stakes in one terse command. First, learn the meaning of what you say and then speak. Words as deeds. We treat speech as vapor, light, inconsequential, yet every major tradition frames it as action. The Hebrew Bible opens with God speaking the cosmos into being. The Tao Te Ching warns that those who know do not speak to excess, implying speech alters harmony. Wittgenstein clinches the modern view. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. If you constantly declare life is unfair, you construct a world where fairness cannot be perceived, only violated. Stoic ethics sharpens the point. For Marcus Aurelius, words were extensions of the will. To misuse them was to misshape character. He wrote, Say nothing untrue, do nothing unjust. Notice the pairing, falsehood in speech is twin to injustice in act. Seneca likened destructive, talk to a blade. The wounds of words are felt long after weapons rust. Neurochemical consequences. Modern neuroscience corroborates ancient warnings. Negative speech, whether gossip or catastrophizing, activates the amygdala and surges cortisol, priming body and mind for threat. Positive, precise language lights up the prefrontal cortex, releasing dopamine and facilitating creative problem-solving. MRI studies at UCLA show that simply naming an emotion, I feel anxious, reduces limbic reactivity. Thus, the right word can literally calm the brain. The wrong one can arm it. The parable of the two frogs revisited. Recall the story. Two frogs fall into a pit. Onlookers shout, "It's impossible. Give up." One frog dies. The other, deaf to the jeers, escapes. She thought they were cheering. A single syllable changed the narrative from doom to determination. If language can seal a frog's fate, think what your daily commentary does to colleagues, children, strangers on the subway. Stoic practices for linguistic mastery. The 3. Gates, truth, necessity, benefit. Before speaking, Marcus Aurelius mentally asked, is it factual? Is it required? Will it help? If any gate closes, choose silence. Vocabulary audit. For 24 hours, track exaggerated terms, always, never, disaster, ruined. Rewrite each in plain accuracy, often, seldom, difficult, setback. Precision. Diffuses panic. Replace complaint with request. Epictetus held that lamenting what you lack wastes energy needed to pursue it. So swap, no one supports me for, could you review this by Friday? Speech that moves reality, not just echoes frustration. Speak to build, not to burden. Seneca advised offering words like a gift, not a debt. When tempted to vent, ask whether the listener can act on it. If not, journal instead. Embrace creative silence. Confucius. Silence is a true friend who never betrays. A pause before response often reveals either a wiser phrase or none is needed. The ripple effect. A kind sentence might feel trivial, yet history pivots on such ripples. Lincoln's malice toward none reframed post-war reconciliation. Václav Havel's phrase, power of the powerless, armed millions against Soviet control. Your scale is smaller but not insignificant. Telling a teenager, I see your effort, can tilt a life trajectory. Telling yourself I'm learning can sustain a decade-long ambition. Closing reflection. Every word is a vote cast for the future atmosphere you and others must breathe. Drop enough careless pebbles and the pond stays stormy. Choose deliberate, truthful, constructive speech and the water clears, reflecting possibilities once invisible. As Lao Tzu warned, watch your words, they become deeds. The Stoic takes that warning as invitation. Forge language as carefully as steel. Wield it sparingly. Release it only when it can carve a doorway to virtue, or else let the strength of chosen silence speak in your stead. Lesson 6. Not everyone understands what you carry inside. You arrive at a family dinner bursting to share the insight that finally eased months of anxiety. The table listens, nods, and within seconds an uncle dismisses it as overthinking. A cousin cracks a joke and someone changes the subject. The gem you polished in solitude now lies dulled beneath casual indifference. You leave deflated, wondering whether the breakthrough was real. The Stoics predicted this disappointment. Epictetus cautioned his students, if you wish to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. He wasn't prescribing arrogance. He was inoculating them against the inevitable misunderstanding that follows inward growth. What you carry is the complex architecture of your experience. Memories, motives, pains, hopes, and most people view only the hallway. When you invite them deeper, they may misinterpret the art on your walls or critique the furniture placement. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer compared individuality to fortress walls. A high wall is unpleasant when one is outside, but priceless when one is within. Lowering the drawbridge for every passerby exposes inner chambers to careless footprints. That's why Marcus Aurelius urged himself to retire into the small fortress of your mind, a retreat not of cowardice but calibration, returning to judgment unclouded by external chatter. The limits of empathy. Contemporary psychology supports the Stoic hunch. Studies on egocentric bias show we routinely overestimate others' capacity to grasp our mental states. Even when loved ones try, their interpretations filter through personal histories, fears, and values. As Kierkegaard lamented, the deepest form of despair is to choose to be another than oneself. Explaining yourself to be accepted risks exactly that, bending to a translation that feels foreign. When silence protects progress. Imagine you're rehabilitating a knee after surgery. In early weeks, the tissue is fragile. A careless twist could tear it anew. Likewise, early-stage transformations, quitting an addiction, writing a novel, redefining beliefs, are vulnerable to skepticism. A classmate's flippant, "Why bother?" can sprain motivation. Seneca advised Lucilius, "Those who seek wisdom must sometimes walk alone. The crowd is not a guide but a gale." Practical guards. Circle of discernment. Identify the handful of people who've proven capable of nuanced listening. Share raw thoughts only within this circle. With others, offer finished sentences or none at all. Signal versus noise check. Before explaining yourself, ask, will this conversation add clarity or merely dilute conviction? If noise probability is high, choose quiet action instead. Scripted deflection. Prepare a neutral response for premature critics. "I'm still working it out. I'll share more when the time is right." This preserves mystery without hostility. Let misunderstanding do its work. Ironically, being misread can strengthen resolve. Nietzsche saw solitude as a crucible where the spirit stretches itself. When no one mirrors your vision, you must become its sole witness, refining ideas until they stand independent of applause. That tension forges authenticity. Buddhist. Teacher Ajahn Chah offered a parable. A monk carries water across a wobbling bridge. If onlookers shout instructions, "Faster, steadier," he may spill everything. Better to fix eyes on the vessel, feel its weight, adjust footing, and cross in composed silence. The destination, safe arrival, will validate the method retrospectively. From validation to verification. There is a difference between seeking to be understood and seeking to be verified. The former requests emotional endorsement. The latter lets results speak. When Copernicus delayed publishing his heliocentric theory, he wasn't timid. He was ensuring the math could withstand derision. Your personal heliocentrism, shifting from victimhood to agency, perhaps deserves the same rigor. Complete the orbit before announcing the cosmos. Closing reflection. Not everyone will comprehend the symphony playing within you. Some will hear only noise. That is not a verdict on the music. Guard the early movements until the melody matures, then invite listeners who can appreciate its depth. Until then, heed Rilke's gentle command. You must protect your solitude. In that sanctuary, your vision grows roots, and one day, when it blossoms unmistakably, even the skeptics will see what words could never fully convey. Lesson 7. Saying. It might calm you, but doing it transforms you. There is real relief in confession. You announce, "I'm finally writing the book," and tension drains from your shoulders. Friends applaud. Your brain squirts dopamine. The goal feels suddenly lighter. Yet that chemical sigh is deceptive. Neuroscientist Peter Gallwitzer labels it the intention-behavior gap. The mind mistakes vocalized intent for partial completion, sapping the urgency that fuels sustained labor. You feel better, but feeling better is not the same as becoming better. The Stoics mistrusted this counterfeit progress. Epictetus advised, "If you want to be a writer, write." No symposium, no scroll-length disclaimers, just the verb itself. Marcus Aurelius broadened the mandate. Stop arguing. What a good man should be and be one. Their brusque syntax reflects a psychological law. Transformation is kinetic, not conversational. Modern research echoes antiquity. In a 2009 study, Derek Sievers found that people who publicly declared goals were, on average, 27% less likely to achieve them than silent strivers. Why? Social acknowledgement preempted the satisfaction ordinarily earned by sweat. Kant would call this heteronomy, letting external praise rather than inner duty dictate motion. That doesn't mean silence forever. It means sequencing, action first, narrative later. Prototype the app before the press release. Meditate daily for a month before touting mindfulness on LinkedIn. The Zen proverb captures the rhythm. Let your practice be solid, and the words will come. A Stoic protocol for turning speech into substance. The 24-hour rule. When you feel the itch to announce a plan, impose 1 full day of private execution first. If the drive survives without applause, proceed. Micro-proofs replace grand. Statements with tangible markers. 1 clean page written, 1 sales call made, 1 cigarette refused. Each micro-proof is a brick in a wall that no compliment could build. Delayed disclosure. Share milestones only after they're irreversible. The manuscript draft done. The savings account funded. The certification passed. Now praise cannot derail momentum. Embodied mantra. Borrow Thoreau's directive. Do not be merely good. Be good for something. Recite it. Then move your feet. Case in point, the quiet reformer. Consider Florence Nightingale. Before she revolutionized battlefield medicine, she spent clandestine nights studying hospital reports by lamplight. Had she posted a Victorian equivalent of "Big plans brewing, cart nursing revolution," patriarchal ridicule might have clipped. Her mission. She acted first, documented later, and her results became irrefutable argument. The alchemy of sweat. Hearing is not as good as seeing is not as good as doing, wrote Junzi, the realist Confucian. Doing converts abstract possibility into cellular memory, muscles strengthen, neural maps redraw, external reality bends. Speech may comfort or persuade, but only action rewrites the world's code and your own. So the next time enthusiasm swells and the tongue races ahead, pause. Let the silence remind you that calm is cheap, transformation costly. Spend the cost gladly in focused labor, and when words finally surface, they will not be predictions or pleas for encouragement. They will be field reports from a life already altered, proof that you chose the harder alchemy of deeds over the fleeting balm of declaration. Lesson 8. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Epictetus delivered the lesson with childlike clarity. Nature gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we might listen twice as much as we speak. Yet place 10 people around a conference table, and most behave as if endowed with 2 mouths and half an ear. They interrupt, rehearse counter-arguments. While you talk, turn dialogue into dueling monologues. The cost is invisible but steep. Ideas are missed, rapport erodes, and most critically, wisdom that might have entered through silence ricochets off noise. Listening as strategic advantage. The Stoics prized acroasis, deep listening, not as passive politeness but as a tactical edge. Marcus Aurelius spent evenings querying generals and slaves alike before reaching decisions. He knew that quiet gathers data, and data refines judgment. Modern psychology concurs. Researchers at Columbia University found that leaders rated excellent listeners inspire 40% higher trust and detect opportunities earlier than verbal steamrollers. The physics of attention. When you truly attend, mirror neurons fire, cortisol in the speaker drops, and conversational bandwidth opens. This biological synchrony, called empathic resonance, turns mere talk into shared problem solving. By contrast, speaking over someone triggers their threat circuitry, shrinking mental bandwidth to fight-or-flight reactions. Confucius anticipated the science. The wise are free from perplexities because they observe before they opine. 3 Stoic listening practices. The golden pause. When another finishes, count 1/1000 before replying. The Girish pause signals respect and gives your prefrontal cortex time to choose response over reflex. Echo and elevate. Paraphrase the core of what you heard. So you value speed over detail, right? Epictetus recommended this to ensure judgments align with facts, not assumptions. Question ratio 2.1. For every statement you offer, ask 2 sincere questions. Socrates used this ratio to surface hidden premises. It still converts debate into discovery, guarding against conversational gluttony. Why is restraint so hard? Ego fears invisibility. Seneca warned that many seek not the truth but applause. Remember, the louder you speak, the less you learn. The less you learn, the weaker your eventual contribution. Silence, therefore, is not absence but investment, compounding, interest in insight. Practical challenge. At your next team meeting or family dinner, aim to speak last. Note how much redundant chatter you avoid and how naturally the room credits you with thoughtfulness when you finally weigh in. This is logos in action, reason-ruling speech, not the reverse. The unexpected gift. Stoic listening also transforms relationships. When you withhold premature advice and instead reflect understanding, people feel seen. That emotional validation often proves more curative than any solution you might prescribe. As the poet Rumi wrote, "The quieter you become, the more you are able to hear." And hearing, in turn, makes your eventual words land with surgical precision rather than scattershot. Intensity. Closing reflection. Our auditory anatomy is a built-in syllabus on virtue, observe, digest, then articulate. Treat words like arrows, few, aimed, released only after the target is clear. Do so and you'll discover that influence grows in the fertile hush between questions, not in the barrage of unfiltered opinion. Listening twice, speaking once. A simple ratio, a Stoic lever, and if practiced, an amplifier of every other lesson on the road from noise to mastery. Lesson 9. If you depend on applause, you won't get far. A standing ovation feels like rocket fuel until you realize the thrust lasts only seconds while the mission may stretch for years. The Stoics flagged this risk 2 millennia before social media metrics began flashing red hearts. Marcus Aurelius scolded himself, "Throw away your thirst for books so that you do not die murmuring but in truth content with your heart at peace, thanking the gods." Books were his era's applause. Likes are ours. Both seduce the ego into swapping substance for sentiment. The biology of approval. Neuroscientist Paul Glimcher shows that social praise lights up the same striatum circuits dopamine floods after chocolate or cash. The brain, wired for tribal survival, interprets applause as proof of belonging. Yet dependence on that hit triggers the overjustification effect. Intrinsic motives wither when external rewards dominate. Ask the child who once loved drawing until prizes turned play into performance. Stoic economics, internal versus external currency. Epictetus split life into what is up to us and what is not. Applause lives squarely in the second column. Build your worth on it and you mortgage serenity to forces you can't control. Algorithms, market fads, mercurial bosses. Seneca warned Lucilius, "He who seeks for applause only collects the emptiness of noise." Better to earn a quieter coin, self-respect minted through virtue. Historical proof. Consider Emily Dickinson. Fewer than a dozen of her poems were published. While she lived, none under her name. Yet she wrote nearly 1,800 pieces, refining meter and metaphor in monastic seclusion. Her legacy towers precisely because she wrote for the work, not the roar. Compare this to authors who shot to fame on trends and vanished as applause shifted. Meteors, not constellations. Practices to wean off approval. Invisible day, schedule. One day each week when you create, train, or study with zero public disclosure. The effort reteaches the nervous system that satisfaction can arise without witnesses. Inner scoreboard. Journal 3 metrics only you can see. Hours practiced. Pages written, promises kept. Review weekly. If external praise spikes while internal metrics stagnate, recalibrate. Applause audit. After delivering work, note emotional state. If elation depends on feedback more than craftsmanship, impose a 24-hour feedback fast next. Harmskir's Stoic Evening Review. Marcus Aurelius asked nightly, "What did I do that was just? What could I improve?" Replace scrolling for likes with this quiet tribunal. Shifting the audience. French philosopher Simone Weil wrote, "Attention, taken to its highest degree, is the same thing as prayer. When you reorient focus from audience reaction to task itself, you trade fickle appraisal for sacred concentration. The act becomes its own applause, and paradoxically, public recognition often follows those who need it least." Closing reflection. Applause is a dessert, not a diet. Enjoy it graciously when it comes, shrug when it leaves, and never let it decide the menu. Your craft, health, or character must withstand stretches of total quiet, those unseen seasons when roots deepen. Depend on the ovation and you'll owe. Halt at the first empty theater. Depend on your internal compass and you'll finish the symphony, whether the hall is packed or dark. Virtue's true encore is the steady echo inside your own chest, telling you the work was honest, and that is a sound no crowd can match. Lesson 10. Not everyone deserves your trust. Trust is the front door key to your interior world. Hand it to the wrong guest and they leave muddy footprints that take years to scrub out. The Stoic philosopher Seneca raised the caution flag early. To give yourself blindly is to throw yourself away. He admired generosity of spirit, but only when partnered with careful discernment. Without that second quality, trust mutates from virtue into liability, the anatomy of betrayal. Social psychologist Roy Baumeister notes that negative experiences carry roughly 3 times the psychological weight of positive ones. One breach of confidence can outweigh dozens of loyal acts, warping future relationships. This asymmetry explains why Epictetus treated discretion as a form of self-defense. Be slow to pour your wine, he advised, lest the cup fall into hands unworthy of the vintage. Bamboo roots, a living metaphor. In Asia, farmers plant moso bamboo and see almost nothing for 5 years while it builds a subterranean lattice. When the shoots finally surface, they rocket 20 meters in a single season. Your trust should mirror that root work, quiet, selective, fortified, so when it emerges it stands unshakable. Broadcast secrets in year 1 and the stalk snaps at the first gust of gossip. Practical filters for stoic and trusting. The small test. Share a minor, low-risk piece of information and observe. Does the person guard it, mishandle it, or weaponize it later? Emerson wrote, "A friend is one before whom I may think aloud." Use small tests to find those rare minds. Character over charisma. Magnetism dazzles, but Marcus Aurelius reminded himself to look into the governing principle of everyone he dealt with, how they treat subordinates, keep appointments, honor past promises. These behaviors predict fidelity better than charm. Time-weighted access. Imagine 3 concentric circles: acquaintance, colleague, friend, confidant. Movement inward requires elapsed time, plus consistent proof of discretion. No skipping. Rings because of shared hobbies or emotional chemistry. Reciprocity rule. Seneca believed trust should be mirrored, reveal no more depth than the other is willing to reveal responsibly. If they demand your diary while offering slogans, step back. Case study: the quiet exit. Consider whistleblower Sharon Watkins at Enron. Before exposing the fraud, she canvassed a narrow group she knew valued integrity over self-interest. Heady? She confided in a glory seeker. The leak could have been buried, and her career with it. Her selective trust protected both the message and the messenger. When to withdraw without drama. If you discover a breach, the stoic impulse is not revenge, but recalibration. Epictetus, and when someone proves unworthy, blame not them but your own haste. Quietly move them outward in your circles, tighten boundaries, and continue your affairs without public indictment. The lesson is internal. Improve the gatekeeping. not the grudge-keeping, closing reflection. Trust, Seneca said, is a precious porcelain, beautiful but fragile and costly to replace. Treat yours accordingly. Offer kindness to all, transparency to few, intimate access to fewer still. In doing so, you honor your own complexity and reserve bandwidth for those who have earned the right to safeguard it. Because in a noisy world, the rare confidant who keeps faith in silence is worth an empire of casual sympathizers who don't. Lesson 11. Some battles are only won in silence. Picture a chess grandmaster mid-game. Around him, the audience hums with speculation, commentators predict moves, cameras zoom in, but inside his mind there is a vault-like hush. One wrong whisper of doubt and the sequence unravels. So it is with life's pivotal maneuvers, career pivots, addictions conquered, identities reshaped. The critical moves happen behind closed doors, protected from chatter that cannot see the board. Why exposure weakens resolve. Neuroscience shows early praise can hijack the brain's reward system, making the idea of progress feel as good as progress itself. But criticism in that same embryonic stage pierces like shrapnel. The prefrontal cortex scrambles to preserve social standing, diverting energy from the task. Seneca foresaw both risks. Things which appear delicate should be hidden, for exposure is the enemy of perfection. Stoics called this guarding of the inner citadel autarkia, self-sufficiency. A strategy still framing itself is like wet clay. Every opinion leaves a fingerprint. Wait until the clay has baked in private effort, and critique can glance off the surface without distorting form. Historical echo, Gandhi's Salt March. Before publicly announcing the 240-mile march that would shake the British Raj, Gandhi deliberated with only 3 trusted aides. Months of silent preparation, route scouting, messaging, supply logistics, meant that when skeptics scoffed, the plan was already in motion, irreversible. Had he floated the idea earlier, colonial authorities could have preempted it, and his own supporters might have wavered. The victory began in a hush long before it rang across headlines. Stoic tactics for silent warfare. Private milestone ledger. Map each covert objective, week of sobriety, prototype version, therapy session, and mark progress only for your own eyes. The ledger becomes a shield against external turbulence. Quiet. Exit principle. If leaving a toxic environment, plan every logistic first, savings, contacts, next roll. When the announcement finally lands, it is declaration, not debate. Marcus Aurelius warned, the noise of argument often drowns the truth of action. Shield the seed phase. Apply Seneca's rule of firmamentum, share nothing until the habit or enterprise has survived 30 consecutive days. Past this sprouting stage, roots anchor deep enough to weather opinions. Silent morning, vocal night. Begin each day with work performed in total silence. No music, no notifications. Reserve conversation for evening reflection when your objectives are already advanced beyond outside derailment. When silence turns to strategy. Silence is not retreat, it is timing. Lao Tzu likened it to water hidden within bamboo, gathering force, until the stem cracks and releases a sudden fountain. Your quiet victories accrue potential energy. When revealed, they possess a momentum talk could never generate, the graceful reveal. Eventually, some battles require public stance, a manifesto, a resignation letter, a product launch. Reveal only when 2 conditions hold. 1. Inner conviction has hardened into decision rather than discussion, and 2. Operational groundwork makes reversal practically impossible. At that moment, the announcement is not fragile glass but tempered steel. Closing reflection. Epictetus urged, never depend on the admiration of others. There is no strength in that. Personal merit cannot be derived from an external source. Some merits, sobriety, courage, mastery, grow strongest when watered in solitude. Guard them there until they bloom beyond the reach of rumor. For the battles that define you, let your silence be both armor and anvil. forging victories whose clang will one day ring loud and incontestable. Lesson 12. The noise of the world is exhausting. Step onto any city street and the assault begins. Honking traffic, neon ads, political rants, dopamine bait headlines, infinite scroll. Each stimulus claws for attention, the mind's most finite currency. Cognitive scientists at Stanford calculate that modern humans process 5 times more information daily than people did in 1986. Little wonder fatigue feels existential. Seneca lamented Rome's clamor long before electric billboards. The mind, when distracted by a multitude of pursuits, seldom brings anything to completion. What was true amid forum gossip is weaponized in a 24-hour algorithm. Noise disguised as action, endless commentary, masquerades as momentum. We retweet outrage, binge tutorials, join Slack threads, activities that simulate engagement while draining the energy required for real change. Thich Nhat Hanh called this the radio station in the head. Constant broadcasting leaves no bandwidth for deep listening to oneself. Stoicism labels such frenzy, periurgia, busybodiness. Marcus Aurelius ordered himself, withdraw into yourself. Amid the storm of voices, find the quiet harbor. Physiological toll. Noise isn't merely irritating, it's neurotoxic. Chronic exposure to discordant sound elevates cortisol and shrinks the hippocampus, seat of memory and learning. Digital noise triggers the same stress pathways. Each ping hijacks the brain's orientation response, the ancient mechanism that once kept us alive in the savannah. Today it keeps us locked in hypervigilance over trivia. 3 Stoic filters for a quieter life. Information. Fast Epictetus advised consuming only what contributes to the good life. Practice a 24-hour news blackout each week. If the world ends, someone will tell you. More likely, you'll reclaim cognitive calories for purposeful work. Notification triaging. Marcus wrote, "Be like the cliff against which waves break, but it stands firm." Disable non-essential alerts. Schedule deliberate signal checks. Twice daily. Waves may crash, but your attention remains a cliff, not driftwood. One-screen rule. Seneca warned against divided aims, for they stretch the soul thin. Work or read with only a single window visible. Multitasking is just rapid task switching, and neuroscientist Earl Miller shows it can slash productivity by up to 40%. Cultivating inner quiet. Physical silence won't help if mental chatter runs riot. Stoic morning journaling acts like a sieve, catching anxieties before they set the day's tone. Cognitive behavioral therapy later validated the method. Naming intrusive thoughts diminishes their velocity. Even 2 minutes of diaphragmatic breathing, inhale for 4, exhale for 6, shifts the nervous system from sympathetic fight or flight to parasympathetic calm. A tale of 2 artists. Consider J.S. Bach composing in a candlelit room, quill poised above parchment, versus a modern producer toggling between DAWs, emails, and social feeds. Both aim to create lasting music, but only one guards a soundscape conducive to genius. Beethoven reputedly poured water over his head to drown external noise and tune into inner melodies. His Ninth Symphony was written in near total deafness, proof that great work can flower in silence's soil. Closing reflection. Lao Tzu whispered, "Silence is a source of great strength." The Stoics nodded and built a philosophy upon it. Noise exhausts because it scatters the self. Quiet gathers the fragments into a spear point. Audit your soundscape, both external and internal, with ruthless compassion. Eliminate what numbs, embrace what nourishes, and remember, you govern the volume knob that turns chaos into clarity. Lesson 13. If you do it for yourself, you don't need to say it. Think back on the changes that truly reshaped you. Odds are they began in solitude, a dawn workout no one filmed, a difficult apology uttered in private, a secret savings plan tucked into a spreadsheet. The engine was not applause but alignment. Aristotle called this eudaimonia, the flourishing that arises when actions harmonize with one's deeper purpose. When the motive is internal, speech becomes optional decoration, useful. At times, unnecessary most of the time. The physics of intrinsic motive. Psychologists Edward Deci and Richard Ryan, architects of self-determination theory, show that behavior fueled by autonomy, mastery, and meaning generates higher perseverance than behavior chased by praise or punishment. External incentives flicker. Intrinsic fire endures. In Stoic terms, actions rooted in prohairesis, the sovereign faculty of choice, carry their own reward, peace of conscience. Seneca summed it up. The reward for a good action is having done it. The fallacy of performance growth. Declare every workout online and soon the performance exceeds the practice. Missed sessions get hidden, minor milestones exaggerated. Growth warps into theater. Kierkegaard warned that purity of heart is to will one thing, but a public-facing will splits in two, one eye on the craft, the other on the crowd. When results lag, shame replaces curiosity, and the cycle stalls. A silent example, Harper Lee. After To Kill a Mockingbird rocketed to fame, Harper Lee retreated from publicity and never released another novel in her lifetime. Biographers reveal she kept writing, revising, discarding drafts nobody saw. Critics labeled her a recluse, yet she told a friend, "I write because I must." Her metric was not output for readers, but integrity to the page. The work, visible or not, satisfied its source. Stoic practices for self-driven action. Private. Contract. Before starting a goal, write a one-sentence vow that specifies why it matters to you alone. Place it somewhere unseen by others, but in frequent view of yourself. The reminder keeps motive local. Solitary milestone ritual. Celebrate progress with a walk, a meditation, or quiet cup of tea. No posts, no announcements. Let satisfaction imprint on the nervous system, unfiltered by external feedback loops. Echo check. After finishing a task, close your eyes and ask, if nobody ever knew I did this, would I still be proud? If yes, you are acting from the center. If no, re-examine your why. Or, delayed storytelling. Should you later choose to share, do so as reportage, not request. Here's what I found works, not here's what I hope you'll praise. The difference is posture, offering versus petitioning, closing reflection. Lao Tzu observed, "Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know." The Stoic does not adopt literal muteness, but understands that deeds grounded in self-respect radiate far without a megaphone. When your compass is interior, the outside world becomes weather, sometimes fair, sometimes foul, never decisive. So craft the habit, finish the manuscript, mend the relationship, quietly, steadily, for the one person who will accompany you from first breath to last yourself. Later, if results blossom into something visible, let them speak their own language. And if they remain unseen, remember Seneca's final comfort. The good man is content with knowing good is done. That contentment is the signature of authentic power, inaudible, unshakable, and entirely your own. Practical implementation threads. Silence as daily practice, the Stoic dawn. What? Begin each morning with 10 minutes of deliberate quiet? No. Phone. No conversation. Why? Marcus Aurelius's inner fortress is built in these undisturbed moments, priming the mind for reason over reflex. How? Breathe 4 to 6 count cycles while observing thoughts without judgment. When urges to narrate arise, label them story and let them pass. Language audit, Seneca's ledger. What? Carry a small notebook, or use a notes app, titled, Words That Weaken versus Words That Build. Why? Epictetus taught that unnoticed. Phrases enslave us. Tracking exposes the chains. How? Each time you utter self-criticism or hyperbole, jot it under weaken, then rewrite a neutral or constructive version under build. Weekly review reveals patterns for elimination. Action first protocol, the 24-hour rule. What? Any new goal must live 24 hours in action before it lives 24 seconds in speech. Why? Stops dopamine leaks from premature applause, Derek Sivers, and converts intent into momentum. How? Draft the outline, run the kilometer, skip the dessert, then decide if sharing adds real value. Selective sharing matrix, circles of trust. What? Map contacts into 3 rings: confidants, earned discretion, collaborators, project-specific, crowd, public. Why Seneca's porcelain metaphor: safeguard fragile ideas from careless hands. How, before disclosing, ask which ring the information belongs to. If it's crowd, reconsider whether silence serves better. Listening ratio, the 2 ears metric. What? Track conversations for 1 day, aim for a 2.1 listen-to-speak ratio. Why? Embodies Epictetus's anatomical wisdom and cultivates the data-gathering power of quiet. How, after interactions, note minutes you listened versus spoke. Adjust next dialogue by adding clarifying questions and pausing 3 seconds before responding. Implemented together, these 5 threads weave Stoic theory into daily muscle memory, shifting you from chronic narrator to deliberate architect of words, actions, and inner equilibrium. Conclusion: silence, far from being emptiness, is the crucible where agency is reforged. Across these 13 lessons, the Stoics have shown us that language is not mere ornament, it is architecture. External applause is not nourishment, it is dessert. And genuine change is sculpted in the unseen hours where no audience applauds. Speak with intention, listen for insight, guard fragile roots, and let proof outrun promise. Seneca reminds us, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Much of that suffering is self-authored in careless speech and relentless noise. Choose instead Marcus Aurelius's path. Retreat briefly into the inner fortress each day, then return equipped to act quietly, consistently, decisively. When deeds align with inner purpose, words lose their burden. They become concise invitations, rather than desperate explanations. So close the tab, pocket the phone, and give yourself the rare gift of deliberate quiet. Use it to craft one small action that needs no announcement. Let tomorrow's results deliver the only commentary required. In the stillness, you will hear a sturdier voice, the one Epictetus called your ruling faculty, saying simply, "Proceed."